She's online. So today I want to do a couple things. We're going to kind of mishmash a few things. I want to talk to you a little bit about different ways to skin the cat, okay? We are therapists. We're mental health therapists. We work with the mind. That isn't the only way to get to the same space, but that's our way. That's the language we've chosen. So let me kind of give you a little background. So I had a friend of mine come over yesterday who's a physical therapist, okay? So obviously physical therapists work with the body. What element is the body? Earth, okay? So if someone chooses a profession like he did for physical therapy, there's obviously an element of earth that's predominant. That does not mean that the person has a lot of earth in their chart, but that's the way they kind of view the world. Maybe they're slow and steady, maybe they're loyal, maybe they're patient, maybe they're committed, and all of these things he is. His style is what we call in Ayurveda kapha. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. So his elements are earth and water. So those can be very stagnant energies. Those could be very heavy sort of energies. And so when someone has a lot of a certain element, it's going to filter through everything they do. So I want to kind of give you this information. I'm going to give it an Ayurvedic lens. I used to teach the Ayurvedic psychology class in my old school. If you like the Ayurvedic language, if you're into yoga philosophy, if you're into that sort of thing, I have on my website lectures called Ayurvedic psychology, and you can see that, and it elaborates on what I'm going to talk about today. So when we're learning to live symbolically or listen symbolically, and we're piggybacking on the element theory that we talked about the other day, I want you to look at it in everything in our life, okay? So he comes over, and he's written a book about something called true breath and how the breath controls the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system has like the fight or flight. In our language, fight or flight, the adrenals, the first chakra, unmet needs of safety, security. So we're saying the same thing. And that was one of the nice things about the conversation. He was speaking from an earth element that I've shared that I lack. And I'm sharing from an air element, not that he lacks, but that I have an excess. So of course my mind, hence I'm a mental health counselor. So regardless of what your element is in your chart, so to speak, think of that you're entering a profession that has to do with air, right? Logic, intellect, the mind. So I'm going to break this down today in what Ayurveda we call the Koshas. And these are called the 5 sheaths or the 5 coverings over that divine spark, over that God, so to speak, that we have within us. So here is us, the God, what we call in spirituality the Atman. It could be the soul. I've used divine spark. Think of the symbol. The symbol is the sun on the astrology chart, right? The circle with the dot. When we did the Jesus lecture of the original sin, we missed the mark. This could be the 3rd chakra, which is the center, the seat of our crown of jewels. I told you the 3rd chakra is the Manipura chakra, the sort of the gold, our inner gold. So whatever way you look at it, it's all there. So in Ayurveda, there are 5 koshas. Kosha is a Sanskrit word that means sheath. Sheath is like a covering. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? These sheaths or coverings are in our life, and they work in different ways. I'm going to go through each of the 5. And you're going to put your client or the people in your life, your family, you're going to layer on the element that we did last time. Okay, so again, we're listening for the element. That's a symbolic language that the person is going to speak and live. Your profession, and I mentioned this last time, is going to be a big sort of indicator as to what element or what chief you're living from. It has to be, because this is where you spend a lot of your time. Okay, so this thread, and in my original theories, I called it the creation myth, the conception story, the origin story, the thread in the truth is in the triangle of the relationship. What's the thread? This is another way. Okay, so it always goes back to that seed, to that dot, to the beginning. Your story doesn't change. Your client's story doesn't change. In my language, I find the mythology, like we did with you. We found the myth. That's going to be your myth for life. My myth is going to be my myth for life. Your myth is going to be your myth for life. If you're not into mythology, that's fine. Find a fairy tale, find a movie in Hollywood. I don't care, but find a story that you can connect with, resonate, so that you have the characters and you can see how it plays out. In every story, what do we know? There's a hero and there's a villain. My story is the Aladdin story. My villain is my shadow or my bad buckets, okay? The ego, the power hungry. I have that possibility in me. And my opposite side, my 0 to 100, is Aladdin, the humble sort of servant. I also have that in me. My truth is going to lie somewhere in the middle. I always joke I want to be on Oprah. Maybe I won't be on Oprah, but maybe I'll be somewhere in the middle. Before, I used to live at the bottom of the ocean, a humble servant to nothing. So let me find my middle ground. And that's our job, is to help the client find that 48 to 52. But you have to identify the story. So another way of saying the soul, the divine spark, the Atman, is the story. Okay, if you know the story, you know the thread, you know the origin, you know the myth of what they come to live. That story is going to have an element or a preferred element. So I'm just going to use mine because mine is pretty on point. And then I'll fill you in about what my friend said. And today followed up with an email so on point. It was fascinating. And when you start living and listening like this, everything opens up. Because people are speaking from their element, either the one they live in usually, and of course the one they're missing, which is what we come to provide, those skills. And I'm going to give you, they're Ayurvedic, they're spiritual, they're mindfulness tools. There's other ways to give the missing element, but I'm going to speak to the Koshas today, so I will be using a lot of Ayurvedic or Vedic language. So I was born in a cult. I was named after an unembodied spirit. A spirit doesn't have a body. What element am I missing in just those two details? Earth, because the body is earth. So right there, in just the story, in two details of my story, you know nothing else. Earth is my missing element. That's the divine spark. That's the conception story. That's the origin story. That's the myth, or call it now today the element. That thread is going to follow the person through their entire life. It's going to show up in everything they do or don't do. So if you don't like finding out the myth, you now know how to check the element on the chart, but you can listen symbolically for the element. There it is. So just those two things. A cult is a spiritual sort of thing, so the body less than, so to speak. And we know the opposite of spirit is matter, so I need more matter, or to honor more of the matter. I learned that lesson. I'm in my body, I changed my diet, I named my dog Dinacharya for the daily ritual, everything that you guys know. So it's very easy. So I want you to identify, you now have your chart element, and you know that, but I want you to go back to your story, your origin story, and think about it. What element is missing or in super excess? Okay, so going back to yesterday. So my friend comes over, PT, physical therapy. He's all about the body, the earth, in Ayurveda language, kapha. Okay, and here I am, all air, fire too, only air, thought, knowledge, the mind. And he starts talking to me about the breath. I have studied yoga philosophy. I have done pranayama, which we're going to talk about today, which is control of the breath. And he is absolutely right. the breath, and we know this, is built into the body so that we can control, get into the present moment. This is why yoga philosophy has pranayama as one of the steps. Then in that thought, in that breath, taking the pause, let me show you my poster, my version, which is what I laughed with about him. Then you can make a choice. In my model, it's the teenager. We live subconsciously as the child. We take the breath, we stop, we think, do I want to be this person? Do I want to honor my unmet need? Do I want to go back into the child bucket, the shadow, what I used to do? Or do I choose to do an adult? That's taking a breath. That's what I call the teenager. That's the spot where you're aware that you have a choice to do it differently. So he talks of the breath because he's a body person, and I talk of the teenager. Same concept, different words, because I work from the air element and he works from the earth element. So I know that I'm not for everybody. My teachings are not for everybody. I have a hashtag, no new stories. No new stories have ever been written or told. All we're doing is repackaging the same story over and over. You packaged it your way, I packaged it mine. The person who wrote Harry Potter packaged it a different way. And what do? We find a therapist or a physical therapist or a spiritual healer or whatever, a womb healer, whatever you're into. We find the healing technique via the element that we have, that we live with. I don't seek physical sort of healing modalities because I reject the body. So of course, one of the ways for me to balance that, and I did structural integration for a while. That was working with the body. I try to get massages that's working with the body, things to put me in the body. I obviously have I got a license in dietetics, so I would understand the body to eat the right food. And my girlfriend has outfitted me with that in terms of my application of my life. So I necessarily have to bring in the body, but I reject it. So how is this going to dictate your therapy model with your client, knowing an element that they're missing or an element that they have? That's part of what I want to teach you today and give you some tips on when you find a missing element, how to bring them in. So obviously, if you know me, I'm your client, you're going to try to bring in the earth element. My therapist one day spoke to a tree, cultivating a tree. A tree is an earth element. That's something doable. For people lacking earth, we think anything small and tedious and earthy, slow and steady, is boring. We don't want to do it. I wrote a book in a day, but I can't freaking walk the dog. I mean, that when you do it in one area, you do it in every area. This is just the way it is. So when you identify, it can help structure what therapy, what homework you're going to give the client. Okay, so I have tools for all the different languages and earth elements or missing elements, and that's what I try to tailor my therapeutic models around, or the homeworks. So we're talking the same thing. There's a saying I think it's in the Yoga Sutras, but I'm not sure, something along the lines of God lives between the inhale and the exhale. So Pranayama is one of the limbs of yoga, one of the ways to get enlightened for the yoga philosophy. And the breath gets you hold the breath in there, you shut the mind. Remember, the whole point of yoga, or to calm the mind, is part of what we do. We can use the breath to control that. Make a choice, child or adult. Exhale. Now you have a clearer mind. You've calmed the mind and you can make a better choice for yourself or something different. That's the use of the breath. What my friend is saying, to control the autonomic nervous system, aka the fight or flight, when we make impulsive, fear-based decisions from our subconscious, from our fear, bringing you to the present moment, and then making a choice from then. So, absolutely right. I know this. However, it's not my language. So I said to him, because my language is air, my language is the mind. I am a mental health counselor. So there's the element in I talk for a living, the air element in that. You're going to see it with the koshas in a minute. And so if you're going to treat me, if you're going to be my healer, my counselor, are you going to talk body, 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 earth, earth, earth? No! I'm going to leave your office saying, that ain't for me. So I said that to him yesterday. I said, I know everything you're saying. And I went and told him in mythology how we're saying the same thing because I wanted him to know that we're saying the same language. But if you're going to treat me, you have to speak to my element, my language, my mind, my kosha, which is the mental kosha, the manamaya kosha. And that's going to be throughout life. Now, does not mean that as a therapist you don't smartly, wisely introduce the earth element. Of course, that's how you help the client balance and achieve that 48 to 52. But you don't start off the bat. So when I was going through my depression, my therapist was, and is, she's amazing, caught on real quick. And she's like, this girl speaks, I speak myth. She's like, I need to be right there with her. Knowing this or not knowing this, her therapeutic skill said, she didn't use the word air element, but she's like, I got to know her language. You got to know your client's language if you want to make a change. So this brings me, we're going to, in a little while, talk about values. Values are super important. I have a statement that says, if it's not a universal truth, it's a value system. Values and judgments, and I have a poster, are always together. If you do not know your values, you don't know your judgment, you don't know your mind. You don't know why you're living in the world. So what happens in every career? Every single career, there is theory. Students hate to learn theory. Why do I have to learn all these theories? Because the theory is the philosophy. So you have to figure out during your career here. Now, I am selfishly leaning you more to a Jungian theory because that's more where I practice from. I actually practice from a metaphysical theory. Every single thing I do, everything I teach, everything I counsel comes from those metaphysical laws, the laws of the universe. And I know that everything beyond those laws, values and judgments. That's the earth element. That's how I bring earth element into my life. I stick with the spirit, which is my preferred element, even though we're talking about the four. Ether or spirit is one of them. Akash, which I work in the Akashic records. So that's my preferred element, even though that's not on the chart, so we'll call it air for today. And how do I bring in the earth? Obviously, I work with people, but I understand values and judgments that are given to you upon conception when you take a body. Human beings are the ones that have values and judgments. Spirit is free of that because they're free of the matter. Okay, that's why sometimes in my field, people think spirit is better than matter, and that's wrong. They work hand in hand. Spirit needs matter, matter needs spirit. What would we be if we didn't have spirit, that divine spark, to make us alive? We'd be a sack of bones dead. We don't exist, right? So these two things work together. So you're going to have to find the way, and you do, whether you know it or not, to put the missing element. But you have to have a theory. You have to have a philosophy of life. That's why in my first book, I have you write a rule book. Most people do not know their philosophy of life. In the old days, religion served as a philosophy. We've moved away from that, either because people don't go to church, we've rejected, a lot of people are adopting the Eastern philosophies, that's fine. You have to have a philosophy. You can build on it, but every one of you needs a philosophy. So, I always show you this. Are you into cognitive? Are you into behavioral? Maybe those of you that like autistic kids want to do some ABA. That's behavioral, that's not my thing. I'm more psychoanalytic down here. That's why I go always back to the 0 to the 7, Freud, Jung. So you have to pick your philosophy and you have to know. In your profession, but you have to do the same thing in your life. You are living your life in a certain way dictated by philosophy and you have no freaking clue what it is. So in my first book, the rule book, in The Truth is in the Triangle, the thread mate and the rules of the relationship, and now in Dethroning Olympus, the family systems, what are your values that are different from your family? You may not know this, and this is super, super important. We're going to do an activity later about your values. Your values is the script your family gave you, is the rule book, the religion they gave you. Okay? So later on, I'm going to have you do 3 values you live by. Whether you know them or not, just like the universal laws, you are holding yourself and everybody in your life to those values. They're judgments. They'll come out as judgment, and I tell you judgments are confessions. Those confessions are about your psyche, your limitations, your value system, and they're not right. They're not wrong. They're simply yours. Being Democrat is no different than being Republican or being a liberal or being an independent or being whatever. But you gotta pick something. I've told you before when we did the chakras that you have to transcend that philosophy for a moment. You have to transcend those values for a moment. Get this spark of God, see God, meditate, know there's more, and then you go right back into the body and you do it again. This is the cycle of quote unquote enlightenment. Chop wood, get enlightened, a split second, chop wood, you're back in your body. Wood is the body. Okay? So you have to know your philosophy of life. In this class, you need to know which school of counseling you want to work with, what psychological foundation you want. Most of you are attracted to my stuff, so you're probably psychoanalytic. If not, I'm just shoving it up down your throat, and that's what you're going to do because you know nothing else. But in counseling theory, we've talked about other philosophies. But that even needs to be transcended. What I really want you and your client, most importantly, to know, and my clients, what are your values? On the book jacket of my book, I don't have it here, and today I'm going to show you a symbol called the Sri Yantra. I have the doors. What? Yeah, it's Hindu or Buddhist, and I'll show you this symbol. It's on the cover of my book. I created my own Sri Yantra. It's a representation. It's actually that. Without the flag, that's the Sri Yantra. I forgot I had it here. You see how there's 4 doors? Those 4 doors represent the earth. Remember, 4 is the earth element, the body. Those represents the 4 directions, okay? So on the cover of my book, I have needs, judgments, things like that, values, because those are what create your world. Everything in your world is happening based on your philosophy of life. Don't you want to know what the hell it is that you're creating and from what state of mind? Don't you want to know? Forget your work. You're going to get clients, you're going to talk symbol and myth and all the Jungian stuff. Take this to your life. You're creating a world. Let me show Anna Barbara the symbol. So this is called the Sri Yantra, Michelle and Anna Barbara, and I'll go through it in a bit. But these 4 doors represent the entrance in. All these triangles represent the thoughts that create your world, and this inner dot right here is, I'm calling your subconscious, you can call it your divine spark, you can call it the Atman, whatever you want. That thought, that creation story that I'm calling the subconscious, creates all of your thoughts, whether you know them or not, and then creates the world that you live in. Yes, just buy into, you create everything. Okay? So don't you want to know why you're creating what you're creating? Right? Well, if you don't know, call it your origin story, conception, pregnancy, birth, 0 to 7, you're not going to know. If you don't know your elements, you're not going to know. Again, I'm giving different language. But most importantly, to bring it to the earth element, if you don't know your philosophy of life, If you don't know your value system, which then in turn gives you your judgments, how are you going to know that you're responsible for creating the nonsense in your life, both positive and negative? Because every value system, all judgments, all philosophies have a dark side. So if you believe in communism, there's a dark side, there's a light side. If you believe in socialism, if you believe in capitalism, right? These are the wars. Same as you. You can name it the Yvetteism. I don't care. Find out your philosophy of life. What is it? Religion? Is it Buddhism? Is it Christianity? Is it Spiritism? For me, it's metaphysics. Everything I do, I build on those universal laws. So my thread always goes back to that. That's going to keep you guided in life, and it's going to create the world around you that you want, because it's rooted in your philosophy. People do not know their philosophy of life. That's why in the first book I say write a rule book. In your couple, write the non-negotiables. That's what you're building on. You don't know what you're built upon. How the hell are you going to change it or understand your thoughts? That's our job in our career. You can find that with the element as well. There's many ways to get to that. Okay, so later we're going to do a philosophy of life assignment that I'm going to tie into the values. You need to know your values. Your values are going to tell you the dark side, which are the judgments, and we all have them. Ignoring them doesn't mean they go away. And you're going to know what you believe so you can live your whole life and go back to that thread. Wait a minute. Does this decision in my marriage go back to my philosophy of life? Does this decision in my business go back to my philosophy of life? Does this relationship and me saying yes or no to my friend to help them move go back to my philosophy of life or my values? And I mentioned that about moving. I am a person that will not help you move. I will pay for the mover. I will pay for someone to help you pack your boxes, but I will not help you move, hence the earth element lacking there too. So many, many years ago, I had a friend of mine say, you didn't help me move, and you're not helping me move. And I said, and I never will. Because my value system in that particular part of my life is very clear. I don't help friends move. But I said to her, true to my philosophy, but I'll help you pay the mover. I'll help you buy the boxes. And if you know what you stand for, your philosophy, aka your values, you don't stray from that. Again, all dogma has to be transcended, moment of enlightenment, blah, blah, blah. We've talked about that, obviously. But while you're in this earth, in this body, you must have a philosophy of life and values. Because if you don't, guess what? They were given to you at the moment of conception, and you have no clue what they are, and you're creating a life around that, and you have no notion. So write them down on paper, create the rules to your life so you can aka dethrone your parents. That's why in the workbook of Dethroning Olympus, I speak to children and their parents, where do you vary from your values? There's a great card game, it's called One Core Values. I have it at home. I think I shared it with you guys the other day in class. I recommend that. If not, I'll send you a values list. If not, go online and Google values. And circle, I write 7 because 7's sort of my number. I'd say my 7 top values. You could do it with your partner. You can do it with your friends. You can see where each other varies. And you can also understand why you think differently than your parents or your friends. It's another way of avoiding conflict, or at least negotiating. These are my values. These are yours. We either see eye to eye and we don't want to be friends because it's so far removed, which is silly, but that happens. Or we're somewhere in the vicinity of the 40 to 52, we can meet in the middle somewhere. You got to start that with your couple. If you have completely opposing value systems, what are you doing together? Most people somewhere meet in the middle. What was that? Yeah, but opposites attract, and if you've been in my class, which you have, you know that it's based on your covert or overt power struggle or your currency. It's not because of your values. Our values are our values. Our values really are not what attracts us to someone opposite. Unless we're trying to say F you to our parents, then we meet someone different race, different nationality or things like that, that we know that in the value system of our parents will be a big FU. That's different, but that's not because opposites attract. That's you saying, I want to defy my parents, and you don't know the healthy way to do it. Okay. So you have to know your philosophy of life. In counseling, you need to know your counseling theory. That's going to dictate your practice, but forget that for a moment. Go to your life. Your parents gave you your values at the moment of conception. They are your subconscious thought. They dictate everything that you create and your external world. That's the way it works. You shift your values, you shift your, what's the word? You shift your subconscious thought, you shift your external world. We don't vary that much from our parents' value system. In astrology, it's found in the first 4 houses. The first house is the body, the physical body. So we have genetics in there, and I do want to talk about genetics and trauma in a minute. The second house is our values, our money. So we usually make money similar to our parents, or we say, you're too rich, I want to be poor because I honor a scarcity. I hate that you made too much money because you're a trust fund baby example. I told you about a client the other day like that. Your siblings and your thought, subconscious as well. Your childhood, your neighbors, your cousins, all of that is the third house. And your fourth house is your physical home. What your physical home looked like, how it lived, it was peaceful, it was conflictive, if there was a parent, grandparent, whatever. Those are the first 4 houses in astrology that dictate your values, that dictate the rest of your entire life. So today when we do the astrology class, I'll talk more about that so you can see how people get their values based on the first 4 houses. And it's on the cusp. Okay? So you have to know the values or not, but you're going to be held to that. So you don't really change all that much from your parents. Really little tweaks. So in the Dethroning Olympus workbook, what happens is I have the parents at 14, we're supposed to start challenging our parents. Developmentally, we know this, between 14 and 16, kids are like, Mom and Dad, leave me at the corner. I want to hang out with my friends. Don't drop me off. I'm embarrassed. That's developmentally supposed to happen. That's also a universal law.
It's like, Mom, I want you to take me to Dick's Lane right now. Leave me at the corner. I
Right.
want to see you.
My brother used to do that to my mom. Leave me at the corner. I don't want my friends to see you. From 14 to 16, your child is supposed to do that. 2 reasons. First of all, it's universal law. It's also developmental theory. Look at Erickson. But you know why? Because that kid is trying to dethrone you. That kid is trying to figure out who the hell he or she is. Most kids don't accomplish that at 14 to 16. Some leave the house, some join a gang. Unfortunately, there are sad stories, but that's the attempt. I'm just talking sort of normal behavior. If parents understood that, they would maybe support it instead of reject it and take it personally. So in my Dethroning Olympus workbook, which I think I posted to the Blackboard, if not, I'll email it or send it to you guys, there's a value sheet. I also have a values thing in my first book, but this is specifically for families. Where are your parents' values different than your own? There's probably going to be some overlap. Hopefully there's an in-between. That's the idea of the activity with counseling family systems. You can do this without your parent and you can do this without your kid, but ideally it's a family system model. So if your value is family and mine is friends, okay, where can we meet in the middle? This is where astrology really, really helps. My daughter is a triple Libra. She's about friends and going out and party and fun, and I'm a homebody. If I would not have understood that her values are a bit different than mine, we would have been at odds our entire life. Instead, I said, I won't say yes all the time, but I won't say no, a 48 to 52 before I had that language. Because I understood that she wasn't going to be a homebody like me. I love to be home. I would never leave my pajamas or my house if I didn't have to. But she likes to be en la calle. She likes to be out and party and her friends, public relations and social butterfly. How do you keep that person at home? You can't. You have to understand your children. And that's why I've written this theory, the systems theory, so that people can understand. But again, my philosophy goes back to metaphysical and universal law. And I know that the law states that between 14 and 16, and I write all of this in the workbook, this is exactly what the kid is supposed to do. I also know psychological and developmental theory, and Erickson says that this is when the child seeks identity. So you have been trying to dethrone your parents. You have been trying to find your own value system, but you don't know how, and guess what? You don't have permission. I had a client this morning who was 72 years old, and we're still trying to dethrone her mother, and her mother's dead. And when you die, they put you on a requete pedestal if you were a good parent. So it's even harder. That's why you got to do this work when your parents are alive, if you're lucky enough to have them alive. If not, you still do the work. Ultimately, your parents are in your psyche, in this subconscious thread. Call it, like I said, the divine spark. It doesn't matter. We're using that metaphor. They're in your head. They already live there. In my first book, I called it the competitive voice and the collaborative voice. The competitive voice is the voice within that tells you you're fat, you're ugly, you're short, you're not good enough, you're not courageous enough. Your collaborative voice is the one that says, you got this, you're good, oh yeah, you're hot. Those don't give you problems. Those are your good buckets. The bad bucket is the competitive voice. And it has the same exact voice as your mom and your dad when they were criticizing you and punishing you. Lo and behold, it's you. But the only way that you can understand it, to give it a story and a character and a mythology, is naming it mom and dad. But it's your story, it's your spark, it's what you came to do here. So I don't care if you use myth, if you use story, fairy tale, metaphor, symbol, element, it doesn't matter to me. Find a language that speaks to you. Values. Today we're doing values, so that's the word of the day. Values and judgments. One is the white bucket, the good bucket, values, and the judgment is the dark or the bad bucket. So you have to accept that every value you has a judgment associated. Hi, Stacy. Understand? So we're going to do a little activity in a bit. And then you're going to see how your values create your thoughts, what you do in the world, what you don't do, and of course the world you create, which is the outer 4 doors. Okay? The people that come into your life, the situations, all of that is dictated by that. So we're going to focus on elements a little today with the koshas and go back to values. So going back to my friend yesterday, his values per se, at one point in the conversation I said, hey, what's your philosophy of life? He studied Chinese medicine, he's Jewish, so he's got those sort of theories. And I said to him, mine is more metaphysical. We're saying the same thing. If you can meet eye to eye with your client, which is the job, then you can actually help the client. They decide they make the change. You don't do anything, but you can bring them the right language, the right tools, the right skills for their element. So if you try to add earth, like he was doing yesterday, I stopped him. I said, your language is not going to work for me. I reject earth. I remember when I was doing my yoga teacher training, at the end of the 2 weeks, we all sat in a circle. And at the yoga teacher training, you do asana, you do yoga practice, and you become a yoga teacher, the physical part. And you get a lot of the spiritual teachings from the Vedas and the Yoga Sutras. Everyone in the circle said, oh, I learned so much about the teachings. What do you think I said? No, I said something, because have you known me to not talk? I knew the teachings, because I'm spirit. My element is ether, but again, we're using air, thought, knowledge, wisdom, right? Book smarts. What I said was, I came for the physical. My rejection is my body. I came to work my body, to get my lazy ass off the couch. I'm very aware, does not mean I've integrated and made the change. I'm very aware of my unmet needs, of my missing element, of my thread. Again, awareness does not equal integration, and it does not equal doing it differently, but it is the first step of the Band-Aid approach. So you have to at least bring your client to awareness. So today I want you to gain awareness of your philosophy of life that you're living and holding yourself to anyway, whether you know the voice in your head or not. You got that from your parents. Where maybe you swayed a little bit, which is good, you dethrone your parents. Not too much, but a little. Your value systems, your judgments, and like we did the other day, your element or your missing element. That's going to tell you symbolically why people live and have the life that they have. So I want to bring it to the koshas, okay? So there's 5 koshas. The koshas I told you are what we call the sheaths in Ayurveda. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. The first kosha is, I'm going to say it in English, not in Sanskrit, is the food kosha. The food kosha, just take a guess. What do you think element that is? Earth. Okay, this is the physical body. These are our physical organs. What therapy, if someone lives in the food kosha or in the earth element, do you think would be very beneficial to help them get and make change? I'm not the therapist for everybody. I do referrals. Who would I refer a food kosha person to? A nutritionist. And hence, on my roster of referrals, and I am a nutritionist, but I do not want to practice nutrition. I can give tidbits and bits and pieces, but that's not what I want to do because I reject that earth element, right? I have a nutrition on my referral list. And you should, in your practice, have these people as referrals for the other elements that you don't want to do or that you reject in your own life. That's absolutely how you build a referral. So my best friend is a functional nutritionist, and I send her people. Doesn't mean that they don't work with me on the mind, but they work with her on the food. These people are very concerned, or like me, not concerned at all, but I'm talking the element that they're living by. They're going to be concerned with their physical, their organs, their structure, their body. So in the ancient text, it says, according to the ancients, the physical body consists of 5 aspects: the head, the torso, 2 arms, and 2 legs. What kind of profession, or if we're looking at physical ailment, do you think that food kosha people or earth element people are going to have? What sort of illnesses or what sort of professions? And I spoke to you about my friend. What does my friend do? He's a physical therapist. So he deals with obviously the arms, the legs, the head, the torso. So if someone works in a specific field, this is to break it down in any way that suits to you. I'm giving you all the information. You're going to find the threads one way somehow. Okay, so you on the intake form, what do you do for a living? Physical therapist? Oh, this is a food kosha person. This is an earth element person. There's so many ways. I'm just giving it all to you so you can figure that out. They still have to do the work. They still have to integrate and do it differently, but it gets you to the story, so to speak, to that Atman or to the subconscious, okay? If the earth element is super, super important. The physical senses are going to be very, very important to this person. Taste, smell, touch, those physical, seeing. You might say to yourself, well, isn't everybody? No, not everybody. To me, it's knowledge. To me, it's spirit. What I see clairvoyantly. Not what I see. Yeah, your physical tells me certain things. When people book an appointment with me, it's Zoom. I only do Zoom if it's astrology because I share the screen. If it's Akashic Records, talking about my ego, I say it's better if it's over the phone. Why? I don't want you to think that I see that you're in a mansion. I don't want you to see that I see that you have a nice Gucci purse, and from there I assume the thing. I don't want you to think that any of your external world, again, missing element, as it always goes back to that, is giving me any information. That's ego too, because I'm like, look at I'm such a badass, how I know that you drive a Lamborghini and I've never seen it. Obviously it's ego too, I'm not denying that.
Yeah, but at the same time you kind of need that, but then it's like extra.
And especially because of the world that I live in and the spirit work that I do. You guys are absolutely going to pay attention to nonverbals. That is super important in counseling because people say a lot of things that they're saying without saying. So I was telling my boyfriend the other day that, yeah, Donald. Yeah, he left yesterday, but he's still my boyfriend. We didn't break up.
I know.
Mentally broke you guys.
Yes.
She broke her
Coffee in the machine. I don't know anything. Something to drink.
Yeah, you did say when he leaves, it's done. That it's done.
No, I never said that. Anyway,
The possibility is there.
anyway, I did not say that. So I told you before the nonverbal super important. So I was telling him the story the other day. In my old house, when I first started, because I didn't trust in my spiritual ability, I used to set out tea. So my old clients will remember this. I would ask 2 questions. You find the house okay? And based on what they would say, they got lost, Google GPS, oh yeah, I know my way around. Anything that they would say, I would know already, sort of their own direction. That was a first hint. So those are things you're gonna listen for as a counselor, okay? Just real world being therapists. The second thing is I would serve them tea, and over the minute or 2 of making tea before we moved into the room, they would say something, and again, symbolic listening, I'd pick up on something. Now, of course, ego, when I do Akashic Records, and I don't, especially with COVID, have anyone over, I don't like the screen, I don't like the computer, I don't like any of that. But I'm listening and I'm talking to spirit and stuff like that, because I'm missing the earth element. Doesn't mean I don't need it. Of course I need it. I need it to answer my life. I need it to achieve the balance. Hence, I attracted a boyfriend that has 6 planets in Earth. I mean, can it be more obvious that I need the earth element? Okay? So just because the person in your client is lacking an element, prefers one, what? Anything with cream, I don't care. Just because they're missing the element doesn't mean that you're going to discard that they need to bring it in, but that can't be the connector. Remember the first session I told you, you validate, you empathize, you have compassion, you create safe space, the person's vulnerable so that they open up to you. You can't start spitting earth elements at someone like me, I'll never come back. So that's what I was telling my friend yesterday. I said, I know what you're saying, I have a theory about it, saying the same thing, but in the mind kosha, which we'll get to in a minute. So you have to know the element in which your client is speaking or rejecting. Then you add it in. We'll get there. Next is what's called the Pranayama kosha. I'm just going to call it the breath or the energy kosha. Prana is vital force. You might have heard it also called qi in Chinese medicine. Okay, this is the energy body. People that like the energy body might say, oh, the aura. They might dream a lot because the dreaming is like the astral plane in spiritual language. These people are more fiery and watery, okay? They have more fire and water. The emotions, they're going to speak from the water element, the emotions. He hurt me, he destroyed me. That's me, that's the language that I used to say. Very much. I'm much more mental, but I'm obviously very water. My moon's in Cancer. So those are the elements that I have a lot of. The system that they're going to speak from or work from or have problems with, and I'm going to tell you about my client this morning, is the circulatory system. So someone who works with circulations or veins, anything in the body that circulates, because that's where the prana or the chi lives, in the circulatory system, I'm talking about if I'm going to locate it, that's where the person has their job or works with, or they're going to have the physical issue. They control the movement, the prana or the circulatory, controls the movement of blood, I'm giving you another key word, lymph, cerebrospinal fluid, through the body, and the circulatory movement of breath through the respiratory system. So this is very important. Breathing, control of breath. In yoga, we call this pranayama. This guy, my friend, was all about the breath. So this was an important sort of kosha for him, more earth, but also this. The pranamaya kosha corresponds to our physiology, the functioning, not the structure. Listen to this. Person who's all about structure, what kind of job are they going to have? Who builds things? An architect, a construction worker, so that you can see how that goes. What about someone that is about the functioning of something? What kind of job do you think they'll have? A manager, a CEO, the dean. They're concerned with the function of how the system works. They're not building the building or cleaning it or architect or construction like Alan. So think of Alan as the sort of building manager, the person, and he fixes the structure. So if you work in structure like PT, okay. Now, if you work with function and you like how things function, you're interested in systems, IT is a function of how it works, you're a prana person. So you're going to have those illnesses. You're going to speak more to that person about the fire and the water element. They're going to be an emotional person. What chakra is that going to go to? Which is the water chakra. The second. And what unmet need is the second chakra? Protection. Someone's been listening. Yes, protection. So the structural is, and this is so funny, not so funny, but funny. Thank you so much. What's funny is that my friend, who is a PT and telling me about the breath, it wasn't even so much about the breath. All he was talking to me about was the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system has to do with safety and security. It has to do with fight or flight. The fight or flight response regulates that autonomic nervous system. Fight, flight, or flee, right? In my language, I've told you before, it controls respiration, reproduction, and digestion. So food, breath, and sex. People that have food, breath, and sex might be in the fight or flight, the autonomic nervous, safety, security. You see how you can get there anyway? I'm giving you all of this so that one thread comes up. So when he's talking about the autonomic nervous system, they're obviously, I didn't even click until now, have to be a safety, security issue. And he's an earth and he's a PT. People, you can't make this up. It's freaking crazy. Okay, any questions about that so far? Okay, I just want to make sure I don't miss my notes. Okay, so it's the functioning that has to do with that. The third one, this is mine and probably most of yours, considering you're all going to be mental health counselors, is the mind kosha. It's called the Manamaya kosha. Again, I'm not focusing on the Sanskrit words. I don't want you to be distracted with that. It's the mind. For those of you who like spirituality, this is the physical plane. This is the astral plane. This is what we call the mental plane. Okay, so if you're into spirit, if you attended my metaphysics post-it note spirituality, that's related. What do you think these people have? What element? Air, of course, air. There's a little ether, but it's air. Okay, so I have a lot of air. I have an unmet need for validation. Third chakra. Even though the chakra element is fire, don't get attached to that. Just think of it in the order of the koshas, okay? This is something called samskara. This is a Sanskrit word that means it's like impressions of thought. I'll explain that in a minute. This is important for you guys, this particular kosha, because all of you studying mental health somewhere, whether you turn into licensed counselors or psychologists, doesn't matter. You're here for a reason. You were attracted to this for a reason, okay? This Manamaya kosha describes the part of the mind that receives impressions from our senses. So you're concerned with the subconscious thought. You're concerned with the mind. How did I create this? How did I get here? How did this person show up in my life? Why is this happening? There's a lot of questioning of your thoughts. Did I have anything to do with this? Is there teaching me a lesson? So this is the world I live in. And this is where I was telling my friend. I do this, the air element. You're the earth element. Don't talk your language. It's not that I don't know breath. It's not that I'm not a yoga practitioner. It's not that I don't use breath. Glad you all do the exhale, inhale assignment, of course. But my issue is this, and this is my element, and because I reject the body and the earth element, of course I'm going to be a bitch and say I don't want your theory. Obviously I want his theory, and I know it, and we laughed about it later. He's like, you're so stubborn. I'm, of course. As I'm on my philosophy, this is my philosophy, and I'm allowed and should stick to my philosophy. Transcend enough to understand everybody else's, but then come back to mine, and that's basically what it is. I give you all the information so that you could pick yours. This has to do with the thoughts and the emotions. Oh, I forgot to tell you this. So Victor rightly said you would refer someone to a nutritionist. Who would you refer someone if they are in the energy kosha or the prana kosha? What referral would you send them to do? If it's circulation, if it's breath. Not a meditator, but good. You would send them to do breath work. So a breath work practitioner. There's a lot online. There's like Ujjayi breath. There's the alternate nostril breathing. So if I see this in a client, those are the homework assignments I'm going to give them. Then, of course, identify the missing element and try to bring it in. But first, speak their language. They're going to love astral projection. They're going to love to know about dreams. That's how you target and cater your homework stuff, your referrals. Then, like I said, you bring in the missing element because that's what's going to make them whole, but not from the beginning. You got to speak the language. If not, they're going to go to someone else, which is fine too. Yes. Yes.
Breath and energy, you said it was fire and water. So say, for example, my fire is water, my water is warm. How would that work out?
Okay, so the combo. The fire there probably heats up the water. That's like me. I have a lot of air and water. So how do they kind of work together? That doesn't create a problem so much in our life. It's how it shows up. Go back to the Myers-Briggs in one of those challengers, for instance, maybe a challenger, where you challenge, but then you retreat back into the emotion and say, oh shit, I just poked the bear, but let me come over here and watch. So it shows up in a personality style. But then you'll find a job like that too, where maybe you're not the hammer that comes down and says all the laws, but you instill the law. So that's how we work it in our life, okay? So this is a little bit about the element, but more about, in today's language, the kosha, the sheath, okay? So you're gonna give them breath work as homework or send them to a breath work practitioner or to a yoga class, but not an asana class, which is like me. I don't wanna do twists and turns and I wanna be in shavasana because I'm a lazy ass in the corpse position, but the breath part of it. So you would say to them, find a breath work or call a yoga teacher, call up and say, hey, do you do pranayama? A class without pranayama is not really a yoga class, or focus only on the breath, or send them the Ujjayi breath, send them the different breaths that have the nostril breathing, things like that. Teach them how to inhale, exhale properly. That's what you would work with that client. The third is the manomaya. What do you think that you would send them to do? Now they're already with you, so they're doing the sort of thought, the mental health part. The homework, it's funny, because this is the one I do every morning religiously. It's chanting. Again, these are spiritual activities. You can find more material-based, earthly-based, counseling-based ones. I'm giving you the spiritual ones. Chanting. So I listen, no coincidence, to the Hanuman Chalisa every single morning religiously. I chant it. Hanuman is the monkey god, and guess what he controls? Thoughts. It's not rocket science. It really isn't rocket science once you understand it. The next is called the wisdom sheath. I've got to create another one here because I used the outer circle. The wisdom sheath. What's the wisdom sheath? What element do you think it is? And when I explain to you the way the universe is created, it'll make sense. It's air.
I mean, that's not necessary.
It's air, okay? In the way the universe is created into 7 planes. So that we live in the physical plane, obviously. We sleep in the astral plane, the mental plane, and then we have what's called the higher mental. What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Because there's a difference. Mm-hmm. Okay, more divine is the word. You apply it. So I say my life was like before my death and then after my death, which I'm only like 3 months old, newborn from my death, and that ended in December. I housed a lot of knowledge, right? I mean, I know a lot of stuff about different traditions. I can sit and talk your ear off, myth, symbol, element, astrology, mythology, you name it. Within my field. Again, my philosophy of life, metaphysics, I build on that. That's my knowledge base. I don't pretend to know anything else that isn't my philosophy, okay? I didn't apply any of it. Not because I didn't want to. I didn't know how. I wrote the books, but I didn't until I died and landed on my couch with 3 times cancer. My whole life fell apart. I didn't learn to apply it. So now, very, very little. Please do not think that I think that I am wise in any respect. But I have a drop of wisdom in the wisdom bucket that hopefully will continue to grow throughout my years until I die. I now am putting it into practice. So you're absolutely right. It is a bit divine. It is a bit divine because it's like, oh, that's what the ancients were saying. Oh, that's what my teacher said. I'll be doing something or reading, or I'll read and I'll be like, oh my God, my astrology teacher said that. That's what he meant 15 years ago when I started this journey. Now I get it. Those ahas. You read something in a book and you're like, oh my God, that person had your language and spoke to you. I said it to you for 3 years. You didn't get it. You leave the classroom, you meet someone else. What happens to kids between 14 and 16? They go hang out at their parents' friend's house. Oh, so-and-so's parents said, I'm the therapist. Can you believe my kid said that Sally Johnson across the street, when I've been telling that kid that forever, they don't want to hear it from you. So I can't take offense as a teacher if you don't want to hear it my way. And tomorrow you read a book that's exactly what my book said. That's part of wisdom. I can give you the information. You have to do with it what you want. So I feel like I'm sort of in that area of my life right now. These are not only symbolic of our element and our origin story and all that, but it's also the process of life. Just like the chakras, we start at the physical body, then we deal with our emotions, and we develop a mind, we go to school, then we go to college, the higher knowledge. I mean, it is the cycle of life, so it's expansive to everything in our life. I'm just speaking to it for therapy. This is what is called discrimination. This is super, super, super important. I'm going to recommend a myth. It's the myth of Cupid and Psyche, especially people that want to do couples. This is a super important myth. Cupid was the daughter of Aphrodite, and if you remember, Aphrodite was the goddess of love and beauty. Psyche was fawned over by all the men. Aphrodite don't like that. And she was like, I'm going to punish Psyche. So she sent her son Cupid. Cupid, you know, is the fat little Cupid that we all love at Valentine's Day, right? And what is he? He has a bandage over his eyes. Love is blind. We fall in love with the illusion, the delusion. That's the snow globe we've talked about. When Cupid is supposed to go to poison her so that she is appealing to any other man on earth, he actually falls in love with her. And they secretly get married. Well, Aphrodite finds out, this is a short version. Aphrodite finds out, gets pissed, and gives Psyche, or mind, super, super important, this myth, labors or jobs. Every time the gods give us labors or jobs, like in Hercules, are supposed to be detrimental, dying, we can never do them. And funny enough, the human always achieves it, just like Hercules. Because that's our goal, is to be able to get God-like, our divine spark, not become God, but get as close to God as possible. That's a myth of Icarus, where his dad glues wings to himself, and he says, fly high, not too high to the sun, your glue will fall off, but not too low. Just right, 48 to 52. So we have to find that. We're not going to be God. God is going to turn you into an egomaniac, a narcissist, and you're going to fall so fast. Okay? But you can't fly too low either, because then you're not living your potential and you won't be happy. So there's truth in that. So anyway, Aphrodite gives Psyche these labors, these jobs. And one of them is a bunch of seeds and rice and stuff, and says you have to separate the seeds and the rice, the grains. And you have to do it by the next morning. There's no way in hell. Have you seen a pile of rice? Imagine you have to separate each individual rice morsel. You can never do that. In the story, the ants come and help. So you're not wrong what you said about the divine. That's a very important part of this kosha. These people believe in divine intervention. These people oftentimes might be led to religious paths, spiritual paths, because they do believe that God, or whatever they call it, is instrumental in them achieving their goals. Those people that on the sports say, Mama, my mama, I love my mama. But you have other people that say, thank God, praise be. Those are wisdom people. Those are this sheath people. There's a belief there that they need divine intervention, that without God or something more than them, higher power, AA, the higher power, there's truth to all these sheets. None of them are wrong. My friend wasn't wrong. Just a different way of getting to the spark, different way of reaching enlightenment. So no one's wrong. Don't get stuck, but work with your client based on what they're into. So if someone calls me and they're Christian, oh, girlfriend, I'm going to use Jesus and I'm going to use the Bible and quote you the Bible to death, metaphorically and metaphysically, and teach you what it means. But I have to speak your language. So these people are very into that. And that myth is a great myth. But discrimination is a super, super important spiritual lesson. Every spiritual philosophy speaks of discrimination in one way or the other. This myth is extremely important for anybody on a spiritual journey, or anyone, anywhere, but you usually, unfortunately, don't learn discrimination until you get a little older. So this kosha does not respond to a physical structure. It's more about intuition. So I have the lower mental, definitely, but I also live, obviously, in the higher mental. Does not mean that I'm higher mental than the lower mental people. This is not, they're circles. Circles don't have hierarchy. Remember that, okay? They're just to show you something symbolic, another map. It has to do with intuition. What therapy do you think you would give people like this? Yvette, you said it earlier. Meditation. These people are going to love meditation. These people might also, and I'm not talking about rap music, nothing against rap music. I'm just speaking vibrationally for a minute. They're probably going to really like opera or classical music. music that speaks to like, I remember many years ago I had a client and I didn't even really understand this language. Now it sort of all comes together why I've given homework. And she was given homework to listen to harp music. That was her homework. The harp music. Isn't the harp the music of the gods? The harp is the symbol of the gods. So these people are very drawn to music. I posted something yesterday, super important. Metaphysics, music, or math. That's the language of the universe. I don't know math, and I sure as hell don't know music, but I know metaphysics. One of those three are going to lead you to the universal truths. One of those three is your philosophy, whether you know it or not. We can do that in another class, break those three down to see what element and whatever, how that works. But one of those three. So Tesla was a mathematician. He knew the wonders of the universe. Einstein, mathematician, scientist, he knew. Stephen Hawking, they knew the science, they knew the math. I don't know that, but I know metaphysics. Jung was a metaphysician. He knew the answers to the universe. That's one of the reasons I'm drawn to his theory, because it's in alignment with my values and what I believe. But that's one of the links. But meditation for these people is going to be where you want to refer them. So I have a friend who owns a meditation company in New York, and I refer, not that I can't teach. Again, I know breath work, I know meditation, I know chanting, I know these things. Teach yourself and learn. But if you're not the expert, refer out. You have your little team. You want to be the know-it-all and do-it-all. That's what I did. And then, of course, I realized, no, I don't really want to do that. At the beginning, you might be afraid to refer because, oh, my God, I'm going to lose clients. No, you're supplementing with a lot. But eventually, you're going to sort of feel it out, and you're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. So I might give an initial homework and say, do you want to learn more about meditation? I send you to so-and-so. Okay. And then the last is called the bliss sheath. So I'm not really crazy about this name. It's called Ananda Maya Kosha because, again, these words are in Sanskrit, and the word Ananda means bliss when you translate it. So Joseph Campbell, who I absolutely love, he is the father of mythology. He studied every mythology of all the traditions and came up with an amazing book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. I don't know if I have it here. And we understood something called the monomyth, that every myth, every story, every one of you, the astrology chart, call it what you will, doesn't matter, follow this order. And his tagline, his favorite phrase was follow your bliss. And I have a little bit of a problem with this. Follow your bliss implies, and it goes in contrast to the name bliss sheath, that's why I'm telling you about this, implies blow up your life, you do you, boo, it's all about me, no one else matters, I have to go find my bliss. That is not what Joseph Campbell was saying at all. Know your story, know your myth, know your element, know your thread, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know your values, know your judgments. That's what he was saying. You think he studied story to then tell you blow up your life? Try to defy the story? Absolute nonsense. So people use this term follow your bliss wrongly. So I don't really like that term, but that's what Ananda Maya Kosha translates at, so that's what it is. But I need to share that with you. So don't think that these people are joy seekers, bliss seekers. That isn't what that means, okay? That's just the name translated. These people are more what we call Akash or ether people. So I'm very Akash. I work in the Akashic records. My main description of myself is an Akashic records reader. I'm an astrologer, I'm a therapist, I'm this, I'm that, but I am an Akashic records reader, and that's my practice. Okay, so these people tend to have that sort of spiritual practice, spiritual reverence. Again, not too different from the wisdom sheath, that perhaps the divine, okay, is super important. These people definitely live in the Akash, in the ether. What do you think the drawback is psychologically, how would this person show up in your practice? If they live in the ether, if they live in the Akash. Absolutely. They deny matter, they're not grounded, their heads are in the clouds. They're missing earth element possibly. So that's another way to use this. Okay, so you have the element from the chart, or you could use the kosha, you could use their language. And they might even say, I say that all the time, I live in La La Land. My heads are in the cloud. I'm a Pisces. Of course my heads are in the cloud and I live in La La Land. That's why the ruling organ of Pisces is the feet. Put your feet on the ground, girlfriend. Earth element. It doesn't matter the language you use. It all leads back to the same. Okay? And then, of course, the unmet need and everything that you've seen in my theory. What do you think this person needs or would like as a homework? I see this a lot because I work with a lot of people in La La Land or in the spirit community. And funny enough that I have to bring them to reality into earth when, of course, I had to have that job so I could, again, say to myself, that's the advice you need, that's what you need. These people benefit from something that's called a Bhakti Yoga. This is what's called a devotional practice. These are the people that do the Hail Mary on the rosary. If you've ever seen that. These are the people that maybe take the malas in Hinduism or Buddhism and they chant with the mala. They need a devotional practice. So my devotional practice, what I call a spiritual reverence, is my Akashic record. So I'm perfectly sort of fit there. You could see how I'm like the mind, the wisdom, and the bliss, because those defy earth. My friend loved the earth and the breath. He was more at the lower, not the lower Koshas. Again, they're circular, they don't have a hierarchy, but in those more earth embodied. So again, you're going to see that overlap with a missing sort of element. Make sense? Okay, so this is just another way. So I'm going to give you a little quickie primer on Ayurveda. Again, tied into this. And if you like this stuff, I've got a bunch of series of videos that are Ayurvedic psychology. It's another way, and I'm going to show you a tool, something you can give your clients if you want, if you like this stuff, because I used to teach the Ayurvedic psychology. Okay, there's something called Prakriti, and there's something called Prakruti. You don't have to learn these words. I'm going to teach it to you in my theory. Prakriti is your makeup, I'm going to just say mental, makeup at birth. And then this is the dysfunction or the imbalance. This is super, super important from a mental standpoint, people. Super important. If you think you're going to change your origin story, if you think you're going to change your myth, if you think you're going to change your thread, if you think you're going to change your parents, you're crazy. You cannot go, where's my poster? Egg in the sperm and take that out of you. Can you? You can dye your hair and you can wear high heels and you can wear green colored contacts. But you cannot take your parent out of you. But for some reason, we think we can, that we're going to do the opposite, which is the same, you know, the 0 to 100, and we're going to be different. Your values, which we're going to do in a few minutes, shift very little. You are your parents. Prakriti is the conception story, the myth, the thread, the element, call it what you want. This was you, in my language, at the moment of conception. In Ayurveda, the Prakriti is your makeup at birth. The way you were born, call it a lot of fire, a little earth, too much air, too much water, doesn't matter. It's perfect. It's viewed as perfect. why your chart is perfect. That's why your myth is perfect. Perfect within the limitation of your body. Remember that, the divine spark. We're not God, but we're made in the light or the vision of God. That you, baby, according to Ayurveda, in my language, the moment of conception, is perfect. What happens? You get judgments, you get criticisms, you live in life, you watch social media, you watch TV, your brother does it different, and you're told you're a piece of shit, you're told you're fat, you're told you're ugly, you talk too loud, you don't talk enough, you eat too slow, whatever your voice is. That's your prakruti. That's your imbalance. That's why you're sick. I am not intended to have a lot of earth. My chart dictates. My prakriti at birth dictates. That's the perfect state. However, this does not mean that I don't try to bring the earth element into balance. Of course, I want to grow and become as close to balance as possible. But I have to honor and accept that that's my thing. And that's what I was telling my friend yesterday. I get it. I know what you're saying. I do the breath work. I am a yoga teacher. I do eat well. But I'm not going to take your philosophy because I have my own language about it. And that's owning my value system. That's owning my philosophy. There's nothing wrong with that. He joked and called me stubborn. Call me stubborn. Kind of funny for someone with no earth. But hey, I'll take it. If that means holding my boundary, that's me returning to my prakriti, my state of balance. I owned my power when I say that. I'm not negating your balance that you were born with water and earth. Great. You found a career and you found a language that works for you. And I found a career and I found a language that works for me. You do not have to become anybody than what you're intended to be. Okay? That's what the follow your bliss is. Be you. That doesn't mean treat people like shit. That doesn't mean blow up your life and not give a shit about other people. I don't know where people thought this you do you boo bullshit. That's nonsense. But you do need to have your 48 to 52. You need to have self. You need to have boundaries. You need to stay on your side of the road. That is true. That's what he meant. Not just blow up your life and treat people ridiculous because you're following your bliss. No, that's narcissism. That is not what Joseph Campbell said, and I really have an issue with that, as you can see. So, your prakriti. Now, there's two types of prakriti. We're doing mental, so I'm only going to tell you the one. There's a manas prakriti. Manas means mind. You can Google Manas Prakriti, or you can Google Ayurvedic questionnaire of the mind. In Ayurveda, they also do the elements, but they have something called the doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. This is another layer. Okay, Vata is air and ether. What element are they missing? Earth. They need earth. Ayurveda in a nutshell, they're going to give them foods and herbs, because Ayurveda is all about food and herbs and spiritual practices that are earth related. I obviously have a lot of Vata ether because I'm not Vata solely. Everybody has all three, but we have a predominant. Pitta. Pitta is fire and water. What element are they missing? Earth and air. Pitta people are fire. They're rocket ships. They're fast. They're sharp tongued. They love spicy food. They get in jobs that are competitive. You need the earth element to slow them down. And the water so that they can process emotion. And Kapha is earth and water. What element are they missing? Fire. Earth and water. Kapha people tend to be slow, sluggish, lazy. So they need fire. They need the spicy food to wear the red, to take leadership roles. I talked to you a little bit about that the other day. Those are the three energies in Ayurveda. However, how does that relate to the mind? Do you know that there are three kinds of depression? Three different types anxiety, 3 versions of mental illnesses: a Vata version, a Pitta version, and a Kapha version. What do you think a Vata version of depression would be? Air and ether. How do you think that would manifest in their thoughts if they have a lot of air and ether and no earth? Non-stop thinking, anxiety, OCD, oh my God. Very different than a Pitta. How would a Pitta person perhaps have depression or mental health issues if it's all fire and water and no earth? What was that? I don't see it as that. I see Kapha more like that. I would say angry, violent, throw things. Okay, no, Kapha is the one you're talking about. And then Kapha depression, if they're so earth and water, they will get out of bed. They'll stay there. They won't take showers. They won't brush their teeth. They're going to be like a brick stuck. So it's not that you're going to quote unquote cure a depression, but you're going to give them the missing element as an antidote to help balance it. Okay? So again, another way to look at it, the mental health issue. But first and foremost, what I want you to learn before we go into the values is that you're going to talk to your client through the element that they feel comfortable with. That's how you're going to build the rapport. That's how you're going to be empathic. That's how you're going to meet them where they're at. Later on, you're going to start introducing the missing element. So first, if you're a Kosh, give a spiritual practice, a devotional practice. In my case, chanting, great. They might already do that. Or if they're not familiar, I didn't know about chanting. One day I found chanting. Oh my God, it changed my life. I've been chanting the Hanuman Chalisa for years because it spoke my language. Of course I need the earth element. And of course, my therapist, in her wisdom, at one point shared a story about a tree that her grandma, that was her way of bringing in the earth element. My dog yells at me, I have to walk him twice a day. My friend, the nutritionist, yells at me, and I eat grounding foods like beets and sweet potato every day. All of your team speaks to your missing element. How cool would that be if we had a center where everybody said, oh, this client is missing this element, whatever language that is, and everybody did their protocol. Everyone gets there. Professionals get to this, but they don't have a unifying language. So maybe the PT doesn't know what the OT is saying, doesn't know what the nurse is saying, doesn't know what the dietitian is saying. But how cool would that be, right? How cool would that be to have one unifying language? Here's a chart. You're lacking earth. Nutritionists give grounding foods. You give this. You take her for walks on the grounds. You get the animals. You get the earth element. You dress her in beige. You're going to have your whole team outfitted, fashion, decorative things in your home, your food. That is whole health. That would be a holistic healing system. But instead, everyone's going to 15 different therapists, different practitioners, no one's speaking the same language, even though they probably have all, in their own intuitive way, understood this person is missing earth, but they don't use that language, and then the client thinks they're just hopping to 15 people, and they don't know that they're all trying to support the same issue, which at the bottom line is a missing element, which leads to a personality issue. Earth is discipline, earth is patience, earth is consistency. I have none of the above. So I wrote a model in my level, the mental kosha, that writes, funny enough, if spirituality is adulting, I have child, teenager, adult. Where's the answer to my problem? In what element did I tell you the square was? The earth element. I wrote this for myself. Francis, in symbolic language, in the number 4. I'm going to speak your language to you. My guides give this to me. The only way I'm going to understand, because I am a freaking hardhead. And here it is. Be an adult, change your This one told me to eat healthier foods. This one told me to have discipline. This one told me to be consistent. The dogs, walk him. My guides have to come and tell me the same thing in a language I'm going to understand. You can't take offense when a client doesn't understand your language. But this is a way to uniformly give the client the language they like, even though they don't understand it. You understand it because you've already picked up on the element. And of course, you could do it to the chart. This, going back to this before we do the values, what element is the 4 doors of these outer corners? Earth. The 4 doors, the earth is the element. What element are those triangles? I told you what the symbol of triangle is. Triangle's fire, delta in math, transformation, thought. Change your thought, change your life.
Delta. Wow, I didn't think that would got me a little mad.
Okay?
Delta.
You change your outer world, how you live, with your thoughts. And it's all started with the little teeny tiny dot of your conception, of your prakriti, of your element, of your story, of your myth, your symbol, whatever language you want. So that's that for the client. Now let's take it to you. Take out a piece of paper or your phone. Sorry, I'm old. I forget that phones serve the same point.
No, at the beginning, she used to say, take out a piece of paper and pen all the time.
Yeah, at the beginning, it's true. Look, I got better. I'm learning.
I did this piece of paper anyway.
I'm just gonna try to draw my.
Jesus Christ.
I'm trying to draw the Shriyanta. Obviously, it's a very bastardized version. Okay, this circle, this little dot, you could call it the divine spark, you can call it the soul, you can call it God, you can call it your conception story, you can call it whatever you want. You name it. Just for the purpose of this assignment, I'm going to call it the values. I want you to write down 3 values that you have.
Oh man, that was so long.
I have your values equal your subconscious, equal your mom and your dad because it's the buckets, equal your origin story, equal your myth. Call it your element. I don't care. You find the word that fits you. I'm giving you the repertoire. Okay? Write down 3 values that you have. Okay, give me one.
Hard work.
Hard work what? Elaborate it a little. Give me a sentence that maybe mom or dad used to tell you about hard work. That's a great one, by the way.
You always have to do what you have to do. You can't think about it. Yeah,
Okay.
learn things. Hardest worker in the room.
Do what, and he is. He is. Hands down, of all the papers, of all the assignments, all of you get A's. Best work all the time. Week after week. It's absolutely true. He lives this value. Do what you do, what? Without complaining, right?
Just do what you have to do. Like you can't do.
Okay. First of all, do you have a problem with this value? Does it bother you? Do you bring it into your life in everything you do? Okay. So this is a value that in Emmanuel's case has to do with the good bucket probably. It doesn't bother him, it doesn't affect him. Now, every light bucket, every good bucket has a bad bucket, which is called a judgment. Every value has a judgment. Everyone. Okay? Everything good has a light side. I was super spiritual, I forgot the body. You would think spirituality, great. What about this? So Emmanuel, tell me the judgment that you put onto people that don't work hard. Lazy. Lazy, hard. What happens to Emmanuel? His subconscious, his value, just for this example, is hard work. What does he create? What thoughts? This is the subconscious thought. These are the thoughts around it. We now know lazy is one of them. What do you think he creates in his world? Our subconscious rules our thoughts by our values. Our thoughts have judgments. So what is he going to create in the world to tell him that this is 0 to 100? What kind of people? What kind of situations? What kind of boss? It could be a super strict boss that holds him accountable, and he loves that. But usually, the world we create is to tell us you're missing an element, get to the 48 to 52, maybe laid back bosses that don't give him strict rules. When he first got here, I think you didn't know what your schedule, they kept changing your schedule. Remember that? That was driving him crazy. Just tell me when I have to work. What I have to do. Then they cut his hours. He lived this out. Your external world, your earth element, your 4 doors, are going to be the people, the places, the things, and the situations you need to get to a balanced middle ground. What would a balanced middle ground be for Emmanuel? Let's just use this class. Turns in paper on time, never late, always A paper, always APA style, perfect. Obviously that's great, but let's just use it as dysfunction for a second. That's 100. Not turning anything in, not doing 0 would be a 0. That's not balanced. What would be a 48 to 52?
Maybe like having little gaps in what he makes, like maybe he misses like a page number or something.
Exactly. He misses a page number, cites a reference that's on an APA style, turns it in a day late. Want to hear a funny story? And now it's coming. I am very lenient with you guys. I let you guys turn in every single thing to the last day. Except I always say, no exception, Sunday at 11:59, because Monday morning first thing. A couple months ago, he asked me, the dog was at the vet, can I turn? I said, no. He wants that response. His psyche wants that response to confirm and prove that you better be hard work and be 0 to 100. It just dawned on me. Because what the hell couldn't have said, knowing who he is, the straight A student. Yeah, whatevs. We are so interrelated. People are responding to our needs, our element, what we need to be told is true, our judgments, our values. You can't make this shit up. That's symbolic living. That's when you live seeing everything's interconnected. Now I know, maybe now I'll be like, oh, I need to help him with the 48 to 52. So maybe next month turn something in late and I'll say yes. I'll help you. I'll be your guide and your divine God, fairy godmother and intervene. But I was responding to his need of this 0 to 100. You need to know your values, your philosophy of life. If you don't know them, you're still holding yourself and everybody else in your life to them. And most people don't know their values. Now, I need you to tell me, any of you, a value that you have trouble with in your life that causes problems. Okay, so I'll share you mine because I know mine because I've worked with it a lot. My mother was all about image and beauty, grace. I've told you this, right? So what did I do? I have to be my mother and my father, right? They are my buckets. They are my mind. They are my shadow. I have to. I have no other way to do it. So I go 0 to 100 until I learn and grow and say, wait, there's a middle. That's when we integrate parents. So what did I do? No makeup. I'm going to be fat. I'm not going to care about my appearance. Did that make me lose that value system? No, absolute nonsense. That's ridiculous. Of course I cared. I When my life was in shambles, I got super skinny. A textbook. If we understand the values, we can explain why people are thinking and creating the world they are. So any way you skin it, you get back to the conception, you get back to the shadow, you get back to the buckets, you get back to the origin, you get back to the conception. And what is image? Do you guys remember what archetype, what planet is image, beauty? Venus. And Venus is what? Aphrodite, the feminine. And what did I need? That I got breast cancer to bring back? My feminine. And I had a birth of Venus party. Because my thread is my thread. So my appearance is not everything to me. But to say that I don't care would be stupid. I live in the Western world. Of course I care. I don't want to be fat. I don't need to be drop dead gorgeous. I don't wear makeup. I won't. Those aren't my values. That's how I dethroned my mother. I dethrone my mother and I shift the value to make it my own. You're not going to stray that far from your parents' value system, people. That's your egg and sperm. You're not going to have green eyes if you have brown. You're not going to be 6 foot tall if you're 5. That's ridiculous. Wear heels. That's your 48 to 52. Wear contacts. That's your 48 to 52. So I said, wait a minute. How can I integrate my mother? How can I integrate Venus? How can I integrate the image, if I'm using the language of the value, that isn't going to kill me? That isn't going to make me be my mother. That's all that mattered. Okay, I maintain a normal weight. I decided a few years ago that I would have quality clothes instead of quantity. So I now have some nice, really nice pieces of expensive pants and things like that that look nice and fall nice. I'm not super skinny. I'm not obese. I'm somewhere in the middle. That's how you do it. Your values don't change. Your subconscious doesn't change. What changes is the world you're living. Now I have an Earth times 6 boyfriend. I have healthy, rooted vegetables in my kitchen, abundant. I'm walking my dog. Did my value system change? Do I still value Venus? Do I still value image like my mom told me? Yes. But now I'm integrated in a healthy way, not an eating disorder, being overweight way. So if you ask your clients what values they have, you're going to see the judgment, or you ask them what the 0 to 100 of the judgment is. Every value system, good bucket, has a judgment, bad bucket. You have a value system whether you know it or not. Better you know it and know how it's dictating your life. Then your entire life, external, is going to change. Your subconscious thought didn't change. Your parents didn't change. My mother's still the same image-based, selfish, manipulative person. I changed. There comes a time when, yes, your parents are at fault. But eventually, if you need to integrate them, you've got to own it and you've got to do the work. They can't do it for you. That would be great. And I always say, parents do your work so your kids don't have to. That's at a younger age. Once you're an adult, tough cookies. Your parents aren't changing. And even if they do, they don't affect your subconscious. A story from Myth that changed my life. And you guys must have seen it the other day. I posted it. And you may not know what it means. There's a famous story called the Odyssey. You guys know the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? The crux of Greek philosophy.
I was forced to read it. It was implemented in our college.
Okay, and I've heard other people say that, and I'm jealous. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had to read that.
It was in high school.
The Iliad is about the Trojan War. Okay, the Odyssey is about Odysseus, the hero of the Trojan War, going back home. And he was told at the beginning of the prophecy, you're going to be gone for 20 years. 10 at war, 10 to get back home. There's layers of symbology there. You need to leave home. You have to go to war with your mind. You have to go fucking fight your parents and dethrone them. And then you have to come back home, which is integrate them and accept that you're not that far. I do care about image, but I'm going to do it my way in a healthy, balanced way. The second layer to that, and I want to quickly just mention emotion and transgenerational trauma, and then we'll wrap up. second layer to that is Odysseus takes 10 years to get home. His wife Penelope is waiting for him. Odysseus is a master shapeshifter. So are we. We shapeshift in life. I'm not going to be my mother, so I'm going to do this and that and that and this and that, trying to skirt our way around it. Bullshit. You are your mother and your father. When he finally gets home, he's disguised as an old man. Penelope and Odysseus are the only people that know that the bed that they sleep on, their marital bed, is made from a tree trunk that's attached to the earth. So they're in the bedroom talking. He's a little old man, and she makes a comment because she's cunning. She knows it's him. And she says she's got discrimination. She had learned over the 20 years discrimination. And she says something to him, oh, well, we can just move the bed. And he's like, no, you cannot separate the marital bed from the olive branch because it's an olive tree branch. And the only other person who knows that is her. There's much symbolism. That changed my life. That quote, when I understood the concept of that, that's where I got my theory of snow globe, of shattering the snow globe. That's when I saw that I had creating the disaster of a life that I had, my marriage, my children, that I was just like my first husband, but that I had the answer to change it. You cannot remove the olive branch, your mother and your father, your genetics, or your subconscious, your origin, your story, your moment of conception, whatever, your element, whatever you want to use, from your marital bed. You're a product of that marital bed, the sex. You cannot separate those things, but you can move it around. You can come back home and integrate. So when I started taking responsibility that I was exactly my ex-husband, and people really have trouble with this, and I was in an abusive marriage. That's not easy to own. He abused me because I abused me. I had covert power inward, and he had overt power with money and yelling and screaming and domestic violence. But I was the same piece of crap as him. I changed my mind, I shifted my thoughts, I moved away, my external world changed, repeated not a similar story, but another version of it, and that's what we do. This story is constantly changing. The inner dot, the subconscious, the myth doesn't change. The genetics, the marital bed, the olive branch, it doesn't change. But you know what changes? The triangles. That's why triangle is a symbol of delta. Symbol of delta equals change in chemistry. Change is transmutation. Change is the fire element. It's the only thing that you can change something and burn it and make it something else. It's the metabolism, the third chakra. That's where you own your power, in the fire chakra, where you transmute and you change your life. This will change as a result of these triangles. But that inner tiny spark, that dot, never changes. I've given it to you in 50 ways. You have to understand this about yourself. Then, of course, to your clients. Does this make sense? One last thing I want to say came up in my session this morning. Goes back to the marital bed. It goes back to the world that we're creating. I am not negating that we have physical genetics, that you have a color eye, that you have a certain height, that you have disease genetics. But we do have something called epigenetics. Epigenetics is sort of like the lifestyle factors that you can do to turn off, let's say, the cancer switch or the obesity switch. You know you can exercise, eat well. You know that you can control your blood sugar, your hormones. You know that maybe you could do certain things to not get cancer. We have the same thing with our mind. I'm going to say this again, and I know that I am not an earth person, so the mind to me supersedes. It's not that it's better or worse, it's just my language, the body. I have a chapter in my book. The body is the loyal servant to the psyche. The body is the earth element. It responds to this psyche, to this dot, to that subconscious. This morning with my client, we were talking about her bladder issues. I didn't know this, but it turned out that her mother had bladder issues. And we identified that she was honoring her mother, not dethroning her mother, through the physical diseases she chose. Even our physical decisions of how we have illness is related to that subconscious thought, to not dethroning our parents. So trauma, transgenerational ancestral trauma, is not only passed through genetically, but also passed through subconsciously and emotionally. And they're doing studies on the bombing at Hiroshima and how 3 generations are still impacted by the psychological damage. I saw it on TV, on Netflix, I think. So I know this because of astrology, because I do astrology, ancestral astrology, and I can see, just like I saw your earth and your land and property and all that, that's there. She had a very marked lineage of how to make money. Honor that ancestral tradition. But we also honor illness. We honor emotional abuse. We honor abortions. We honor all these things. People don't like to hear this. The physical body, illness, disease is the only official okay that we're having in our world to take a day off, to not be a hard worker, to not be sick. I needed cancer. I didn't know how else to do that. I didn't have it in me. I didn't have the power. I didn't have enough fire, funny enough, me, to own it and to dethrone my mother. I needed cancer to slap me in the ass, to lay my ass down, because I too have this lazy, hardworking. And I didn't know how else to speak in the break room that I want to commit suicide. I mean, so physical illness is oftentimes the only time the psyche knows how to get permission to change the thoughts. But don't think that illness is all genetic and physical. I broke down this woman's entire back. She had a bad dream. She had physical pain. I broke it down symbolically. By the end of the session, she's like, I have 70% less pain. Because it doesn't mean awareness solves it. Doesn't mean I have a magic one. I'm not saying you're not going to have cancer or cure asthma or whatever. Please do not. I'm not that ignorant. But subconscious programming is what's linking us to physical illness. Do not kid yourself that that genetic component is another way you honor your parents and say, I'm not going to dethrone you and I'm going to be so loyal that I'm going to get the same disease as you. There's many ways to skin this cat. You guys share the Pranayama Kosha with me. Welcome. This is the way it is in my world. This is the language I speak. I think you've all decided your philosophy just by being in this class. You might find another thing that works for you in graduate school, but as of right now, this is the way I think you're all viewing the world. Find out your values, because you're being loyal to them anyway. And you don't know them, they don't care. Any questions before I take attendance? Let me stop the recording.